Let me ask you the most dangerous question in all of physics. Not dangerous because it might lead somewhere harmful, but dangerous because it might lead nowhere at all. Dangerous because it sits at the very edge of what human thought can reach, where language starts to fail and mathematics offers no foothold. Dangerous because after 50 years of thinking about the deepest problems in physics, I still don't know if this question has an answer, or if it even makes sense to ask. Why is there something rather than nothing? Read that again. Let it sink in. You exist. The device you're reading this on exists. The atoms in your body exist. The planet beneath you exists. The galaxy containing that planet exists. The universe containing that galaxy exists. All of it, every particle, every field, every quantum of energy, all of it is here, real, present. But why? Why should there be anything at all? Why not just emptiness, void, absolute nothing? Not empty space because empty space is still something. Not a vacuum because a vacuum has properties, has energy, has the potential for particles to appear. I mean nothing, true nothing. The absence of existence itself. This question has haunted philosophers for centuries. Leibniz called it the fundamental question of metaphysics. Heidegger considered it the deepest question human beings can ask. And for most of history, physics stayed away from it, considering it too philosophical, too abstract, too far removed from the practical business of understanding how the universe works. But I've come to believe that physics cannot avoid this question forever, because the more we learn about the fundamental nature of reality, the more we realize that existence itself is strange. The fact that anything exists at all is not obvious. It's not necessary. It's not logically required. It's the deepest mystery there is. Let me take you through what physics can and cannot say about why anything exists. This is not a journey toward answers. It's a journey toward understanding why the question is so hard, why it matters, and what it reveals about the limits of human knowledge. Start with the obvious response. Maybe something had to exist. Maybe nothing is impossible. Maybe the very concept of absolute nothing is incoherent, and existence is the only logical possibility. This was Spinoza's view. He argued that the universe exists necessarily, that it could not have been otherwise, that asking why there's something rather than nothing is like asking why 2 + 2 = 4. It just does. It has to. There's no alternative. Einstein was sympathetic to this view. He believed in a universe governed by mathematical necessity, where the laws of physics and the existence of reality itself flow inevitably from some deeper logical structure. He spent his later years searching for a unified theory that would show why the universe has to be exactly the way it is, with no arbitrary choices, no contingent facts, just pure mathematical necessity all the way down. But here's the problem. We haven't found such a theory. In fact, the more we learn about fundamental physics, the more arbitrary the universe seems. The constants of nature, the strength of gravity, the mass of the electron, the charge of the proton, none of these appear to be mathematically necessary. They could have been different. As far as we can tell, there's no logical reason why they have the values they have. String theory, which was supposed to give us the unique theory of everything, turns out to have an astronomical number of possible solutions. The string theory landscape contains perhaps 10 to the 500 different configurations, each corresponding to a different possible universe with different physical constants. Instead of showing that our universe is necessary, string theory suggests it's one arbitrary choice among unimaginably many. So the idea that something had to exist, that nothing is impossible, doesn't seem to be supported by physics. Our universe appears contingent. It could have been different. It might not have existed at all. Let me try another approach. Maybe the universe created itself. Maybe there's some mechanism by which existence can bootstrap itself into being, pulling itself up by its own ontological bootstraps. This sounds absurd, but it's not entirely without physical support. In quantum mechanics, we have something called virtual particles. In the vacuum of empty space, particles constantly pop into existence and then disappear again. They borrow energy from the vacuum, exist for a fleeting moment, and then pay it back. The vacuum is not empty. It's a seething foam of virtual particles appearing and disappearing. Some physicists have speculated that the universe itself might have originated as a kind of quantum fluctuation, a bubble of space-time that appeared spontaneously from nothing, driven by the same quantum processes that create virtual particles. Lawrence Krauss popularized this idea in his book, A Universe from Nothing, arguing that physics has essentially answered the question of why there's something rather than nothing. But this argument has been heavily criticized, and I think the criticism is valid. The quantum vacuum is not nothing, it's something. It has properties, it has energy, it obeys laws, it exists within the framework of quantum field theory. Saying the universe arose from the quantum vacuum is not explaining why there's something rather than nothing. It's explaining how one kind of something gave rise to another kind of something. The deeper question remains unanswered. Where did the quantum vacuum come from? Where did the laws of quantum mechanics come from? Why do these laws exist rather than no laws at all? Why is there a framework within which quantum fluctuations can occur? These questions are not answered by pointing to the quantum vacuum, they're just pushed back one level. This is a general problem with scientific explanations of existence. Science explains things by reference to other things. Physics explains the behavior of matter by reference to laws. It explains the laws by reference to deeper principles. But at some point, the chain of explanation has to stop. You reach bedrock. You reach something that just is, without further explanation. Some physicists embrace this. Sean Carroll, a cosmologist I respect enormously, has argued that the universe is simply a brute fact. It exists. That's all there is to say. There's no deeper reason, no explanation, no answer to the question of why. The universe just is, and asking why is asking for something that doesn't exist. I understand this position. It's intellectually honest. It acknowledges the limits of what we can know. But I find it deeply unsatisfying. Not because I think Carroll is wrong, but because the question won't let me go. Every time I contemplate the fact of existence, the sheer improbability of there being anything at all, I feel the pull of the question. Why? Why this? Why anything? Let me try yet another approach. Maybe the question itself is flawed. Maybe asking why there's something rather than nothing presupposes something that isn't true. Maybe the question contains a hidden assumption that once exposed reveals the question to be meaningless. One such assumption is that nothing is the default state, the natural condition, what you'd expect in the absence of any cause or reason. We ask why there's something rather than nothing as if nothing were somehow simpler, more probable, more natural than something. But is that true? Think about it. What is nothing? Can you even conceive of absolute nothing? Not empty space, not darkness, not the absence of matter. Absolute nothing. No space, no time, no laws, no potentiality, no possibility. The complete absence of existence. I can't picture it. Every time I try, I end up picturing something. A void, an emptiness, a blank canvas. But these are all things. A void is a thing. Emptiness is a thing. A blank canvas is very much a thing. True nothing seems to be inconceivable, not just difficult to imagine, but perhaps logically impossible to imagine. Some philosophers have argued that nothing is actually more complex than something. Think about what nothing would have to be. It would have to be the absence of everything, every possible thing, every configuration of matter and energy, every arrangement of space and time, every mathematical structure, every abstract object. To specify nothing, you have to exclude everything. And everything is infinitely complex, so nothing, defined as the absence of everything, might be infinitely complex too. On this view, something is actually simpler than nothing. A universe with simple laws and a finite amount of stuff might be less complex than the complete absence of all possible things. And if simpler states are more probable, more natural, more expected, then something might be more natural than nothing. I find this argument intriguing but not fully convincing. It relies on a particular notion of complexity and probability that may not apply when we're talking about existence itself. What does it mean for something to be more probable than nothing before there's any framework for probability to exist? The concepts we use to think about this question, probability, complexity, simplicity, may be tools that only make sense within an existing universe, not tools that can explain why a universe exists in the first place. Let me try one more approach. Maybe existence is self-explanatory. Maybe the universe exists because it's the kind of thing that must exist once you allow for any possibility at all. Maybe existence is a kind of attractor in the space of all possibilities, a state that any coherent description of reality must include. This is related to the anthropic principle, but it goes deeper. The anthropic principle says we observe a universe compatible with our existence, because if it weren't compatible, we wouldn't be here to observe it. That's a selection effect, not an explanation. But some philosophers have proposed a stronger principle, a kind of self-selection where existence itself selects for more existence, where being has an inherent tendency to be. Robert Nozick explored several versions of this idea. One was the principle of fecundity, the idea that all possible worlds exist. If all possibilities are realized, then our world exists simply because it's one of the possibilities. Another was the idea of a self-explaining explanation, a principle that accounts for its own truth. The ultimate law of nature might be a law that explains why it itself is true. These ideas are speculative, perhaps too speculative for serious physics, but they point towards something important. The question of why anything exists might require new concepts, new ways of thinking, new frameworks that don't yet exist. The answer might not be found within our current physical and philosophical vocabulary. It might require a revolution in thought as profound as quantum mechanics or relativity. Now let me step back and consider what all this means for how we understand the universe. In physics, we've become very good at answering how questions. How do particles interact? How does gravity bend space-time? How did the universe evolve from the Big Bang to now? These questions have answers, mathematical answers, precise answers, testable answers. Physics is extraordinarily successful at them. But why questions are harder? Why do the laws of physics have the form they have? Why are the constants of nature what they are? Why is there something rather than nothing? These questions push beyond the normal methodology of physics. They ask for reasons, not just mechanisms. They ask for purposes, not just causes. They ask for meaning, not just mathematics. Some physicists think these questions are meaningless, that asking why is a category error, that the universe doesn't have reasons, only causes. I understand this view, but I don't fully accept it. The question of why anything exists feels meaningful to me. It feels like a real question that deserves a real answer, even if we can't currently provide one. And here's what strikes me most deeply. The fact that we can ask this question at all is itself part of the mystery. We are arrangements of matter and energy, collections of atoms, patterns of information, products of the universe we're trying to understand, and yet we can step back and ask why the whole thing exists. We can contemplate the possibility of nothing. We can wonder at the sheer improbability of our own existence. Consciousness asking about its own existence. Matter wondering why there's matter. The universe becoming aware of its own contingency. There's something almost paradoxical about this, something that suggests we're touching the edge of something profound. Let me tell you what I genuinely believe. After all these years of thinking about the deepest questions in physics, I believe the question of why there's something rather than nothing is real. It's not a pseudo-question, not a confusion of language, not a misunderstanding of what science can address. It's a genuine mystery, perhaps the deepest mystery there is. I believe we don't currently have the answer, not because we haven't looked hard enough, but because the answer might require concepts we haven't developed yet, frameworks we haven't built, ways of thinking we haven't discovered. Just as Newton couldn't have answered questions about quantum mechanics because he lacked the necessary concepts, we might not be able to answer questions about existence because we lack concepts we can't even imagine yet. I believe the answer, if there is one, will surprise us. It won't be a simple mechanism or a clever logical trick. It will reshape how we think about reality, about existence, about ourselves. It will be as revolutionary as the discovery that matter is mostly empty space, or that time flows differently for different observers, or that particles don't have definite properties until they're measured. And I believe the question is worth asking, even if we can't answer it. The asking itself changes us. It forces us to confront the strangeness of our situation, the improbability of our existence, the mystery at the heart of everything. It humbles us and elevates us at the same time. We are small, insignificant specks in a vast cosmos, and yet we are the cosmos asking about itself. There's a passage from Wittgenstein that has always stayed with me. He wrote, It is not how things are in the world that is mystical, but that it exists. The facts of the world, the laws, the particles, the forces, these are all amenable to scientific investigation. But the existence of the world itself, the sheer fact that there is a world, this is mystical in a deep sense. It's where science touches something beyond itself, where physics meets metaphysics, where knowledge meets wonder. I don't use the word mystical lightly. I'm a physicist, not a mystic. I believe in evidence, in mathematics, in the hard work of building theories and testing them against reality. But I also believe that reality has depths that our current methods may not reach. The question of why anything exists is one of those depths. Some people find this unsettling. They want physics to have all the answers, to explain everything, to leave no mysteries. I understand that desire. But I've come to peace with the idea that some questions might remain open, perhaps forever. Not because they're meaningless, but because they're too meaningful, too deep, too close to the foundations of reality itself. And here's the strange thing. I find comfort in this mystery. The fact that existence is unexplained, perhaps inexplicable, makes it more wondrous, not less. If the universe were a logical necessity, if it had to exist, if nothing else were possible, that would be interesting but somehow diminishing. The universe would be like a mathematical theorem, true by necessity, containing no surprise. But a universe that doesn't have to exist. A universe that's genuinely contingent, genuinely mysterious, genuinely unexplained. That's a universe full of wonder. Every moment of existence is a gift that didn't have to be given. Every atom is a miracle that needs no explanation, because no explanation would be adequate. Every conscious thought is the universe knowing itself, asking about itself, marveling at its own existence. We are the question asking itself. We are existence wondering why it exists. And maybe that's the closest we'll ever get to an answer. Not a mechanism, not a principle, not a mathematical derivation, but a participation. We are part of the mystery. We are the universe, experiencing its own inexplicable existence from the inside. I started by calling this the most dangerous question in physics. Let me end by explaining why it's also the most beautiful. The beauty is not in the answer. We don't have an answer. The beauty is in the question itself. The fact that we can ask it. The fact that we care about it. The fact that a universe that didn't have to exist has produced beings who wonder why it exists. Think about what that means. Out of all the possible configurations of matter and energy, out of all the ways the universe could have been, it produced beings who ask about their own existence. Beings who can contemplate nothing. Beings who feel the weight of the question and are moved by it. Maybe that's not an accident. Maybe the universe had to produce beings who ask this question, not as a matter of logical necessity, but as a matter of deep structure. Maybe the question and the questioner are as fundamental as particles and fields. Maybe consciousness wondering about existence is not a side effect of physics, but something central to what reality is. I don't know. After all these years, I don't know. But I know that the question is real. I know that it matters. And I know that asking it is one of the most profound things a human being can do. Why is there something rather than nothing? I don't have the answer, but I have the question. And perhaps in the end, that's enough. Perhaps the question is the answer. Perhaps existence wondering about itself is the deepest truth there is. Look around you. All of this exists. All of this is real. All of this is here, now, present. And it didn't have to be. That's the mystery. That's the wonder. That's the question that will outlast all our theories and all our explanations and all our attempts to understand. Why is there anything at all? I don't know. And that's the most honest thing I can say.